Have you ever had to vote for a popular politician because of a media attention over a politician that you have not heard of on the media? Or maybe you voted for the politician on the ballot just to finish up the ballot and turn it in without knowing who you are voting for. We've all done it before. We base our votes a lot on who we hear about and not so much who we actually do our investigating on. However, voting for a president due to relationships or popularity can be truly devastating for our country in many ways. According to Pew Research Center author Lee Rainey on pewresearch.org in 2019 said, trust is an essential elixir for public life and neighborly relations. This proves that the trust of the U.S. government in its own politic in its own poli- yeah, in its own politics is shrinking, and most believe a shortage of trust in government and other citizens make it harder to solve of the nation's key problems. No matter where you live, I'm 100% sure your community, city, and state are affected whether you vote or not in presidential elections. Many of us not knowing how that can be possible. The issue with a large majority of the voters is a lack of accurate information on potential candidates because of the various sources in which information may come from. People not being informed about candidates they are voting on is causing the wrong politicians to be in power, taking our own country down little by little politically and financially. The president is placed in a place of such power to represent what I would like to think is a majority of the people who chose this individual. People often choose the most likable individual instead of the more qualified to their own lives. Recently, people have been voting with the media and not informing themselves on the candidate, just voting with the popularity through the media. So first, I'm going to talk about what is sadly happening to our country by choosing the wrong politicians as president. Who is responsible for the changes, and what all of us can do to revive our country. Our most recent president was chosen in part due to his relations with former President Obama because of the low popularity of Mr. Donald Trump, had as well with the majority of Americans causing discomfort in our country. In an article written by CNBC news staff writer Steve Leisman on CNBC.com in July of 2020 says that Biden's economic approval rises slightly and is just 37% despite Bidenomics push. That's just mind-blowing, and in only a short amount of years, our current president has such low rate of approval from our country. People voted for Biden because of the urgency to get Trump out of power. This demonstrates the urgency people had to get Trump out of power, that people did not notice what the shift was going to do to our economy. People not being informed about an educated vote led to Trump being out of power even though he had the country on a decent financial stability, as to Biden, who we know right now, as a previous quote stated, is not working with. So now that we've discussed what has been happening to the economy in our current presidency, I will be talking about who are responsible for a potential change in how our country is being ran. So in an article on whitehouse.gov, written by author of the same website in October 2021, states that the power of the executive branch is vested in the President of the United States, who also acts as head of state and commander-in-chief of the armed forces. This is a more complicated way of just simply saying the people elect the politicians and those politicians oversee the president's action. Another big factor that might be able to conduce change in our federal government are federal Supreme Court justices. The reason being is these justices can also inform through the media of their opinions or where they stand as well, to help the voting community make an educated vote. After learning the simple way of driving a change in our federal government, I will now be talking about how people can begin this change. So you might be wondering, how can the people drive a change for a president on the next elections? Well, the first option is simple. According to the New York Times, author Ian says, when it comes to politics, Americans have become pretty pessimistic. People don't trust the political parties. Voter turnout is mediocre. Go out and vote, people, simple as that. You can also support for a presidency change voting in your local government. Involving yourself in city activities and elections can help describe what kind of people or what their ideals are in certain political parties. Politicians in local government are much easier to reach for the community than the president, for example. So as I've discussed, there are many ways to increase active voting in elections across the board. Once again, a president is placed in such power to represent a popular opinion. I first talked about the decline of our economy and the hit it took under our current president, who is responsible for a change and what people can do to initiate this change. So hopefully every one of you thinks about every local, state, and federal election and stay actively informed so we do not get caught complaining for someone we voted for after the next elections for presidency as well.